The stairs were hardwood. I remember that detail more than anything else. Not the crack I heard when my shoulder hit the landing, not my brother's voice calling down after me, not even the Christmas music still playing from the living room. Just the grain of the wood pressed against my cheek and the smell of pine from the tree we decorated 3 days earlier, and the strange floating feeling of not quite knowing which way was up. Oh my God, my sister-in-law's voice, high and thin. She slipped. Not. He pushed her. Not. Did you see what just happened? The story was already written before I'd even lifted my head off the floor. I lay there for a moment longer than I needed to. My shoulder was screaming, the kind of pain that makes your vision go white at the edges, then gray, then slowly resolves back into color. I pressed my palm flat against the hardwood and pushed myself up, and nobody moved to help me. My mother stood at the top of the stairs with her hand over her mouth. My brother stood 3 feet behind her, arms crossed, watching me with the same flat expression he'd worn my entire life. "I'm fine," I said, "because that's what you say. That's always what you say." I wasn't fine. My brother is 4 years older than me. Growing up, everyone called him the responsible one, the steady one, the one who had his head on straight. I was the sensitive one, the one who overreacted, the one who, according to my mother, had a gift for making things harder than they needed to be. He was 11 the first time he pushed me. I was 7. We were in the backyard and I'd taken the last popsicle from the freezer and he wanted it. And he shoved me from behind into the metal edge of the lawn furniture. 4 stitches in my chin. My mother told the urgent care nurse I'd tripped over a sprinkler head. She believed it. I think she needed to. After that, it happened maybe once or twice a year, always at family gatherings, always when there were enough people around that any single person couldn't be sure of what they'd seen. A stumble on the porch steps at Thanksgiving, a fall into the edge of a glass door at Easter. My elbow, my hip, my knee, my wrist. Small injuries, each one easy to explain, each one just barely plausible as an accident. I stopped telling people what actually happened sometime around age 12, not because I'd given up exactly, but because I'd done the math. My word against his, every time, and every time the verdict was the same. She's clumsy. She's dramatic. She doesn't watch where she's going. By the time I was in my 20s, I'd built something like a normal life around it. I had an apartment 40 minutes from my parents' house. I had a job I liked, friends who knew nothing about any of this, a therapist I saw every other Tuesday who kept using the phrase family systems in a tone that suggested she understood something I was still working on. I went home for holidays because not going felt like losing something I couldn't name, and every year I told myself it was fine. He was older now. We were both adults. It wouldn't happen again. It happened again on December 23rd. We'd been at my parents' house since noon. My mother had cooked enough food for 3 times as many people, which was something she did when she was anxious, and the house smelled like rosemary and butter and wood smoke from the fireplace. My brother had arrived with his wife and their 2 kids a little after 1. The kids were running circles through the living room. My dad was watching football. For about 4 hours, it genuinely felt like a normal Christmas. We took photos before dinner. My mother's tradition, every year, a photo on the staircase, the whole family lined up on the steps. My brother and his wife on the top step, then my parents, then me on the second step from the bottom because I was the youngest and that was just how it went. We'd just finished. People were moving, laughing. The kids were already bolting toward the kitchen. I turned to head downstairs and I felt his hand between my shoulder blades, flat and deliberate, and then I was falling. It wasn't a stumble. It wasn't a trip. My feet never caught on anything. I went forward and down, and my shoulder took the impact at the landing, and I heard something, a sound like a thick branch snapping. And then the floor. I heard my sister-in-law say she slipped. I heard my mother make a sound I'd never heard from her before, small and caught in the back of her throat. I heard my brother, from the top of the stairs, say, "Are you okay? What happened?" Like he didn't know. I said I was fine. I sat up, and then I stood up, and I held my right arm against my body because moving it felt like something tearing. My mother came down the stairs and put her hand on my face and said, "Let me look at you," and I let her look, and her eyes moved over me in that careful way she had, and I watched her decide. "You need ice," she said. "Come sit down." Not, "What happened?" Not, "Did he?" Just, "Come sit down." We ate dinner. I sat with my arm in my lap and didn't use it. My mother brought me ibuprofen and a bag of frozen peas and refilled my water glass without being asked. My brother cut into his roast beef and talked about a project he was managing at work. His wife fed their youngest from a small container of yogurt she'd brought from home. My father said the gravy was the best my mother had ever made. I drove home at 9 o'clock. I didn't sleep. The pain had moved from sharp and immediate into something deeper and more constant, a grinding ache that radiated from my shoulder down through my arm and up into my neck. I lay on my back and stared at the ceiling and tried to remember the exact sequence of what had happened. His hand, the placement of it, the pressure, deliberate. I kept coming back to that word. Not an accident of crowded space, not an elbow or a bump, flat hand, center of my back, and then nothing under my feet. By 4 in the morning, I accepted that I wasn't going to be able to talk myself out of going to the ER. I drove myself. I'd thought about calling a friend, but it was 4 in the morning on December 24th, and I didn't know how to explain it, didn't know which version of the story to tell. I think my brother pushed me down the stairs, sounded like something you'd say to a therapist, not to a friend at 4 in the morning on Christmas Eve. The ER waiting room was quiet. A man with his hand wrapped in a kitchen towel, a woman with a child asleep across 2 chairs. I checked in and gave my name and sat down and held my arm against my chest and waited. The nurse who called me back was efficient and unhurried. She took my vitals, asked me to rate my pain on a scale of 1 to 10. I said 6, which was low, but I'd been managing pain for long enough that my scale was probably off, and typed things into a computer. When she asked what happened, I said I fell on a stitch case. "At home?" "At my parents' house." She wrote it down. The doctor came in about 20 minutes later. He was older, gray at his temples, with a kind of calm that felt less like pleasantness and more like experience. He asked me the same questions the nurse had asked. I gave him the same answers. He examined my shoulder carefully, pressing in ways that made me hiss through my teeth, and then he ordered an X-ray. I didn't think much of it. You fall, they X-ray. They tell you nothing's broken. Or you have a fracture. They give you a sling. You go home. That's what I thought would happen. He came back into the room about 30 minutes after the imaging. He had the X-ray pulled up on the tablet he was carrying, but he set it face down on the counter when he came in and sat on the rolling stool and looked at me directly in a way that felt different from before. "I want to ask you something," he said. "And I want you to know you don't have to give me the same answer you gave at check-in if that answer wasn't the full picture." I felt something shift in my chest, not fear exactly. Something closer to relief, which surprised me. "Okay," I said. "Your shoulder shows a fresh fracture, a fracture of the acromion. That's consistent with the kind of impact you'd see from a fall." He paused. "But there are also 3 other sites that show healed fractures in different stages of remodeling. Your clavicle, 2 ribs on your left side, and your wrist, though that one's older." He watched my face. "Those are injuries that happened at different times, months or years apart, that healed on their own without being treated." I didn't say anything. "I have to ask," he said carefully, "whether someone did this to you." The words sat in the air between us, and I looked at them, and I thought about 17 years of frozen peas and ibuprofen, and she's just clumsy, and you need to watch where you're going. And I said yes. He was professional and calm about everything that happened next. He explained what he was required to do: contact the hospital social worker, file a report with the police. Not because he was taking anything away from me, he said. Because the evidence he was looking at documented a pattern, and a pattern like that had to be recorded. The social worker's name was Geraldine. She was younger than I expected, maybe 35, with reading glasses pushed up on her head and a notepad she never actually wrote on. She sat with me for almost an hour. She didn't push. She asked questions and waited, actually waited, without filling the silence herself. It was the first time I'd ever told the whole story in order, all of it, from the popsicle when I was 7 to the hand on my back on the stairs at my parents' house 23 hours earlier. When I finished, she said, "How many times have you reported this?" "Never," I said. She nodded like that wasn't a surprise to her, and somehow that was harder to sit with than if she'd looked shocked. 2 officers came. One of them did most of the talking. A woman, maybe 40, who introduced herself and then sat down and opened a notebook and wrote down everything I said with the kind of focus that made me feel like the words actually mattered. She asked about the most recent incident first, then worked backward. She asked about witnesses. She asked whether there was any documentation. Photos. Medical records from previous visits. There were no previous visits. That was the whole point. But then she asked whether anyone in my family had a phone that might have photos or video from the day before. I thought about my mother, standing at the top of the stairs with her hand over her mouth. I thought about the family photo tradition, the photos we always took. My mother was taking pictures, I said slowly, right before it happened. Her phone, she was still holding it. The officer wrote something down. I didn't call my mother until that afternoon. I'd gone home, I'd slept for 4 hours, I'd woken up with my arm in a sling the hospital had given me, and a folder of paperwork on my nightstand. I sat on my couch in the gray Christmas Eve light and held my phone for a long time before I pressed her name. She answered on the second ring. "I've been worried," she said immediately. "You left so fast. I wanted to make sure." "I was at the ER," I said. "I've been there since 4 this morning." Silence. "My shoulder is fractured," I said. "And when they took the X-ray, they could see the old breaks, the ribs, the wrist, the collarbone." I stopped. "They called the police, Mom." The silence went longer this time. "Sweetheart, I need you to think about yesterday," I said. "I need you to think about what you saw. Not what you decided it was, what you actually saw." She didn't say anything for a long time, and then, very quietly, I was still taking pictures. I closed my eyes. "My phone," she said. I had the camera open. She stopped. Started again. "I might have video." She turned the video over to the police without my brother knowing. I don't know exactly what that cost her. I know it wasn't nothing. The footage was 8 seconds long. It was taken from the top of the stairs, slightly angled, her hand unsteady because she'd been laughing at something one of the grandkids had said. You can see the back of my head, the back of my brother's shoulders. You can see his arm move. You can see me fall. You can see exactly where his hand was. He was charged in February. Felony assault causing bodily harm. The current injury, and once the investigators pulled the old ear-adjacent records, the urgent care visit from when I was 7, an incident report from my college years I'd forgotten I'd even filed, and then abandoned. The picture got wider. His attorney tried to argue the video was ambiguous. The prosecutor showed the jury the X-ray alongside the video and let them sit with both for a while. He was convicted in June. The sentencing was 2 months later. I sat in the courtroom and I didn't look at him. I looked at the prosecutor's desk and I listened to the judge read the sentence. 3 years. Mandatory minimum, no immediate parole consideration given the documented pattern. 3 years is not a long time, I know that. But it is not nothing. My mother called me the night after sentencing. I almost didn't answer. When I did, she didn't say anything for a moment, and neither did I. And then she said, "I have spent 30 years telling myself I didn't know." I let that sit. "I knew," she said. "I think I knew," and I told myself a story instead. Her voice broke. It was not a neat or composed sound. "I don't know if sorry is something you want from me, but I'm telling you anyway. I'm so sorry." I didn't say it was okay, because it wasn't. But I didn't hang up either. We've talked 6 times since then. Short calls, careful ones. I'm not sure what we're building or whether we're building anything at all. But there's something different in her voice now, some quality that wasn't there before. An absence of the performance, maybe, of the story she needed everything to be. I don't know what happens next with her. I don't know what I want it to be. What I do know is this. For most of my life, I thought the absence of proof was the same as the absence of truth. I thought that because no one had ever written it down or photographed it or taken it seriously, it somehow became less real. Less mine to hold. The X-ray changed that. 8 seconds of shaky video changed that. Not because the truth became different. It was always the same truth. But because something outside my own memory finally confirmed it. And that confirmation, as small and clinical and impersonal as it was, did something I hadn't known I needed. It made me a reliable narrator of my own life. I still see my therapist every other Tuesday. She doesn't say family systems as much anymore. Last month, she said something that I've been turning over ever since, that surviving something for a long time isn't the same as being okay with it, and knowing the difference is actually where the work begins. I'm working on it. My shoulder healed. The fracture was clean. The orthopedist said, good bone density, good alignment. I did 6 weeks of physical therapy in a gym with a window that looked out at a parking lot, and I did every exercise they gave me, and now I can reach above my head again without flinching. It's a small thing, but some days it's the thing I think about most. That simple, ordinary motion, arm raised, nothing catching, nothing giving way. The way a body can be broken and still come back to itself. The way you can spend years holding yourself careful and small and one day, without planning it, find yourself taking up exactly the amount of space you were always supposed to have.